Okay, so before the unreleased content starts, I just wanted to say that it is really, really old. Not too old. I think like right after COVID type of old, but it is really prominent like as uh, I guess like an old editing type of way I used to do. So you will see that. It might be a little cringe because I cringed myself like, oh my gosh, why is it like this? But I did tweak a few things in it, not a lot, but a few things that's, makes it easier to digest. But it is the last thing that I worked on for that series, and I don't think it'll ever be made a thing again because, for one, the story is just, it's pretty dead. And it was kind of based on like an old Smash Sisters chapter 3, and we have so much more now. So it's kind of, it's no point really to keep up with it. I'm sure, people will say like, "Oh, I want more." I don't know what I could do with the series like that again. So, but yeah, just also after once it's done, I'm going to explain like certain characters you see pop up and like their role and things like that. So if you want to see that, stay afterwards after the unreleased episode.
over here! Oh! Hey!
So that was that. Um, and I just left that small part just to give a feel of what would have happened if I kept going, like the atmosphere and things like that. Serenity and Blossom would have went in looking for Peach's daughters and Dandy and all of them trying to, see what they could tell them to help with the situation. But I'm gonna show you the new outro that was made for that series too, because I made an intro and I made an outro. The way I'm so glad y'all finally saw that now. That was made like years ago. Like so many years ago. And I was so hyped to show it for like the revamp of that series. But anyways, so I'll go down the line of like what was supposed to happen in that episode. I even have like my notes for it because like I was keeping up with, what was supposed to happen and things like that. So basically, after Blossom and Serenity talk to Cherry and Dandy and everyone else in the castle, Peach and Daisy was supposed to, well, first, before that even happened, in Hyrule, Zelaya and Linkara were supposed to be dealing with a fragment. I don't remember who it was going to be, but it was going to be a fragment of somebody. And, Zelda was going to be doing something minding her own business. And then for some reason, it would all come together like that. Peach and Daisy would get there, probably help. I think Zelda was going to assume that it was like an enemy from Lorule, like it was Hilda again. And then there's the fragment meeting. At the fragment meeting, if you've been keeping up with the episodes, which I would be surprised if you have because it's so old, Stabby, the one that was like the top head, diamond head fragment or whatever, she organized the meeting and held Candy and Lollipop hostage. While the meeting was happening, Candy and Lollipop were going to try to escape, but it wasn't going to work. They would have got caught. And then for what they were going to be talking about at the meeting, it was going to be how they aren't in full power, which is why they were getting beaten by their originals, and that it's because of Tashi. Similar to how like the Smash Sisters world, because Tashi kind of like numbed the world and kept everyone at like a base level. Because in the Smash Sisters world, no one is at full power. That's why they're in a tournament to, gain a wish and do whatever they want. But no one is at their full potential in the Smash Sisters world. Everyone's kind of on the same level. So it was kind of like that in the Chaos thing too. And to fix it, they had to go and do something to Tashi. And on the other hand, Tashi, once she would have figured out what was happening with the fragments, she would have tried to erase them, but figured out she couldn't because it was something that wasn't from Evian. So she was going to strive to figure out how to kill them off first. Now for characters you didn't get to see played out in the episodes. So the first one is Dressica. She was just supposed to be a fragment, similar to how Lumara and Cherry were hanging out and doing stuff in the first few episodes. Dressica and Belle were supposed to team up and go against both of them at some point, because if you remember, Belle didn't accomplish absorbing Lumara, and she said next time, it wasn't going to be, she was destined to make sure it happened. So she was going to ask Dressica for help, to accomplish that, since she kind of was jumped. Even though she was jumped, she still won. But yeah, that's who Dressica was. In the battle, I think Lumara and Cherry still would have won, and Dressica and Belle would have got shattered. If like we're just gonna go fully there and just say the full story, I think that's what would have happened. But that's who Dressica was. Okay, so next is Allura. Allura, well, if you've been paying attention, it's kind of like the good girls that were in Smash Sisters get the, evil fragments, and the bad girls, in Allura's case, and someone else's case, gets the treatment of, I guess, a goody two-shoes. But basically, Allura was supposed to be kind of like a reverse fragment, where she was created to, be bad and absorb the original, but she just didn't want to. She just kind of wanted to be left alone and more of like she was shy. She just didn't want to do anything. She just wanted to, be by herself, mind her own business, and exist for whoever she was. She didn't want to absorb the original Black Cherry at all. However, for Florencia, she just wanted to get to the bottom of why she was even created, why she had to absorb it. Even though the fragments know their purpose, none of them question it. They just do it. Florencia wanted to get to the bottom of why it was happening all together. She had questions, she had everything. She was rebelling, basically. Florencia and Allura are like the rebel fragments that don't care about the goals of what they were supposed to do and just want to figure out everything. Eventually, both of them were supposed to be the ones to help like the main team or main girls that were like getting down to the problem of the fragments. They were supposed to help with that. But also as a downside, because they still were fragments themselves. So even when like other fragments figured out that they were helping, the originals stop all of the evil plans, it was kind of like they were hunted as well. And with fragments stronger than them, like the Dark Three, they could easily be shattered. So it was just kind of like a dangerous situation for them. Next, we have these three. Now, the first two are not even in Smash Sisters. These are original characters from My Friend May. They were supposed to be like special guests. If you've been keeping up with the series, like I always keep saying, the one in the middle you should have seen from the first episode. She was assisting Lumara in the space crash or meteor crash that happened when really it was Belle that crashed onto Evian. The one on the right, Maria Bernard, was just going to be like another kind of special guest type of situation where she just popped in and gave information about things, but she wasn't going to be prominent as other characters. And then the last one in the front, Mina with the glasses, she was just going to help Allura and Florencia in just one special part in an episode to guide them along towards what they should do. Because in Mina's lore, she's dealt with the same thing of, being used for some plan that could care less about her existence. So she was just going to guide Allura and Florencia into, breaking away from that and finding whatever purpose they wanted to find for themselves. Last but not least, we have the two shadowy figures next to Stavi. So if you play Smash Sisters and know the roster, I'm sure you can tell who is who just from their silhouette. But on the right is Angeline and on the left is Tashi. But it's not the regular Tashi, it's edgy Tashi. Back then, before lots of major voices like Lover and Sad and Innocent, before they got their roster additions, Edgy also got one too, but she felt more like a side voice. And since she wore black, I kind of assumed and had an idea of her kind of taking like a hatred role and just wanting to be in power, aside from Tashi, assisting chaos instead of fighting against it like everyone else. In Angeline's case, I think she just would have been a fragment, but a very strong fragment, if you know how powerful Angeline is. All in all, it really was just a creative idea of some type of story that I made up in my head. It wasn't really anything to be taken too serious. And it was just something I did for fun while, waiting for more Smash Sisters like things to come out, or like just to express what personalities and powers and things like that I thought of when seeing these characters in Smash Sisters. This won't be the last time you see something of this type of story, but as for Super Smash Sisters Universal Chaos, this is like the final hurrah for it. So that's just that.